Okay, very good evening. Well, good evening, Gareth. Matthew, good evening. Thanks for joining us again, Gareth. And welcome, brethren, if you're tuning in via YouTube, Facebook, or any of our other social media platforms. This is our Young and New Masons Interclub social extra version with the questions that we didn't quite have time for last week. So, Gareth, thanks very much for coming back to us once again. I always think it's a popular and it's a good thing if we get you back a second time, because it proves that you're very popular and the questions are coming in aplenty. So appreciate you back again.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll obviously we don't want to keep you too long, so we've got some questions. We've got the guys that asked them, and so we'll just put those to you, Gareth, and please feel free to answer as freely as you can. And Matthew, if you'd like to begin, that'd be great.
Yeah, of course. Our first one, Gareth, is from Barry Hayward of Essex Cornerstone, and he asked, do you feel that the creation of light blues and young Mason clubs has had a positive impact on Freemasonry in general?
Yeah, I do. I think it's sort of created a bit of a focus. I mean, there was always a desire at the highest levels to try and attract and retain younger men into Freemasonry. Though, you know, I have to say that I don't think that was a particular focus until maybe 10 years ago. But certainly since then, there has been, you know, the desire to do this. And with that, a sort of growing realization, I guess, that young men want more out of Freemasonry, and they want different things out of Freemasonry, because for a lot of young men, you know, the social side is a lot more important, certainly in their early days, than, you know, maybe the spiritual side or the developmental side or whatever, you know, whatever else might float people's boats in Freemasonry. And so, you know, what the creation of New and Young Masons clubs, light blues clubs, whatever you want to call them, has done, has created that focus for all provinces and all districts. You know, in the very early days, it's true to say that there were some provinces that were a bit reluctant to allow the establishment of a New and Young Masons club in their area. And that's all gone away, really. That's old news now, and we really are in a situation now whereby everybody realizes, all the leaders in Freemasonry, from the very top, you know, down through to provinces and districts, realize that actually these things are a force for good. And then they're not just for socializing, you know, they are actually a contribution to, you know, some of our strategic aims with regard to improving membership. And I think I said last time, you know, that force for good has fed through into both recruiting, attracting new members, and retaining the ones that we've got. So, you know, I think it's been an incredibly positive thing, and it's something I've been, you know, very, very proud to be involved with at a national level and indeed at a local level. And I often say, you know, when people say, well, what are your 3 or 4, you know, big ticket items that you've delivered as a provincial Grand Master? And I always say, you know, the establishment of a New and Young Masons club in this province has been a you know, a massive thing for us.
Yes, and what a leading club they are too. So it's really good to see. Touching on something you mentioned about, you know, these days the social side of Freemasonry is prevalent. When you joined Freemasonry, or just use the knowledge that you have of way back when, would you say Masons maybe 30, 40 years ago would have joined purely for that spiritual side and to find out more about themselves, as opposed to finding that yes, the Young and New Masons clubs are very social and very good at sort of keeping and retaining members? Would you say it's sort of flipped on its head ever so slightly?
I think, if truth be told, I mean, I joined 36 years ago, so I'm squarely in that bracket that you're talking about. I think if truth be told, people didn't really know why they joined. And I certainly didn't know why I joined. I simply thought I would like to because a lot of my friends, a lot of the people whom I respected, whom I liked, who were the same, this is going to sound a bit pompous, but who were the same sort of people, were members. And I thought, well, you know what, if they are getting something out of it, then I probably will too. And I'd like to see what they do get out of it. And of course, in those days, you didn't really know very much about it. You didn't know there was a spiritual side or a developmental side. You'd probably heard a bit about the charitable good that people did. You probably guessed that there was, I think I probably did guess that there was some sort of social aspect to it. But I had no idea really what I was getting into. Nowadays, of course, people know much more about what they're getting into when they join because they have so much access. They have access to so much more information.
Yeah.
But still, people join, for charitable, spiritual, developmental, social purposes, and frankly, I don't see anything wrong with any of those. I'm not somebody who thinks that we must be in it for the developmental aspects or the spiritual aspects. I think that's misguided. Frankly, I think whatever reasons people have for joining Freemasonry are good enough. Yeah. And I hope that once they've joined, they then learn more about it and get even more out of it.
Yeah, I think it's more of a for me and I can see it through the Sarsen Club members. It's a much more personal journey and a personal reason for why people join, as opposed to really not knowing why they've joined, like you sort of alluded to 30, 40 years ago. So I get the ever-changing face of Freemasonry, and I think that's probably why it's so popular and why it's a great.
Going back to what you said there, Mitch, just to add to that, when we were first setting up PrGM and we were going around the province and promoting it in lodges and festivals and whatnot, the amount of kind of encouragement that we had from Dark Blues and people who had provincial rank and honours was amazing. I think if we were there just to recruit them to begin with, we'd have probably got up and running a lot quicker because they'd all suggested that, it'd be great if we had a club like that.
The Freemasonry goes through phases, doesn't it? I think if we'd invented new and young Masons clubs in 30 or 40 years ago, they'd have failed dismally because A, we wouldn't have had enough young people to populate them, and B, there was still, the age of deference was still very much in existence, and the hierarchy was absolutely king. The hierarchy and was rigid. You certainly wouldn't have had access to provincial officers, let alone grand officers or leaders in the organisation. My provincial Grand Master when I joined Freemasonry was Lord Swansea, and apart from one occasion when he visited the Masonic Centre where I was a member, I never saw him.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah.
And that was quite normal. I mean, absentee landlordism, was quite normal in those days, and things changed, quite markedly at the start of this century.
Amazing. Okay, thank you for that. And this next question comes from James Wilson of the Cambridgeshire Light Blues. He says, Gareth, how do you see Light Blues young Mason clubs feeding into the university scheme, and how can the two complement each other?
Yeah, this is quite a tricky one, isn't it? This again is something that's evolved because at the start of the establishment of New and Young Masons clubs, there was a bit of a disconnect, I think, between them and university scheme, and we've sort of tried very hard. David Wotton and I talk about this quite a lot, and indeed I've attended the university scheme management board meeting to talk about it, and I know, you know, David is very supportive of New and Young Masons clubs, and very supportive of, as I am, ensuring that there's some sort of fit between the two. There is, of course, a lot of overlap between the two, because quite a lot of members of clubs, you know, come from university lodge backgrounds, but some don't. You know, in a sense, you know, the university scheme members are probably a bit of a subset of members of New and Young Masons clubs, although I'm quite sure that there are some who wouldn't wish to be associated with the former, which is a great shame, because I think, you know, working together, they can be an even greater force for good. I got David to come and speak at the New and Young Masons Club's conference about 3 years ago now.
Yes.
Was that Cardiff, I think, wasn't it?
Was it Cardiff that he came?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yes.
I remember it was Cardiff because we had a lodge meeting afterwards, and he was the last one in the bar at about 1 o'clock in the morning. I had to get up early the next day for a meeting. And I said, David, we really have got to go, because I've got a meeting at 9 o'clock. Oh, he said, that's nothing. I've got a meeting at 8:30 in London. So, yeah, I think the two just really do need to work together, because actually, by and large, the objectives of both organizations are exactly the same.
Yeah. And I think we did touch upon this with Sir David when we had our social with him, and he was very much of the same opinion, but trying to keep them, there's a lot to be said in keeping them separate and distinct at the same time, because they bring in so many different variations and aspects which are good for both parties, and like you say, with the overlap that happens as well, it can only be good news for all. So it's a great question.
Yeah.
So our next one, Gareth, is again from Barry Hayward, Essex Cornerstone, and he asks, what office that you've held did you enjoy the most in your mother lodge?
You can't say all of them.
Okay. What office have I held? I'm tempted to say Director of Ceremonies, because it's nice to be in charge, isn't it? Or so you think. Actually, my favourite bit of ritual in most degrees is done by the senior warden. So at least it is here, it is in my mother lodge. So, you know, I tend to really enjoy, if I'm asked to do an office, you know, in the lodge now, I'll usually opt for senior warden, because I like doing the first degree charge, and I absolutely love the second degree tools. You know, so doing senior warden has been a great joy. But you know, I come from a director of ceremonies background. You know, I was provincial DC for a number of years, and so being DC of the lodge, I suppose, was greatly enjoyable too.
So as a senior warden in your mother lodge, Gareth, was it a more traditional thing that you did at your second degree working tours as a senior warden?
Yeah, always. My mother lodge works Oxford ritual, and as do all lodges bar one, actually, in South Wales, and so yeah, generally the senior warden does the second degree tools, and the first degree charge, the second degree tools, and then it varies in the third degree as to what you do. But often the charge there as well, or maybe the tracing board.
It's always great to hear those variations of what people have to do, and I always think myself lucky when we don't even have to do the charge of the junior warden, so it's always good. The next question comes from Dan of Northampton Hunts New and Young Masons Club. He says, Gareth, COVID-19, thoughts on the changes to the ceremonies at this stage? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a nice one, isn't it?
Yes, I know they're open to opinion across the board. And
yes.
What do you think?
Well, I'm very much in favour of doing what we can to allow those who wish to meet as soon as they possibly can. I completely understand people who don't want to meet, but there are a lot of us, and I include myself in this, that are champing at the bit really to get back to our temples and back to our ceremonies. Let's be under no illusion. The restrictions that are placed upon us with regard to changes to the rituals certainly in the first degree are not ideal, and I don't think anybody thinks they're well. I'm sure nobody thinks they are ideal, but they are the best that we could come up with to allow people to bash on with first degrees if that's what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
The changes to the second degree and to installations are minor, actually. And of course, given my national role in the Royal Arch, I was a little bit involved in the decision to preclude exaltations in the restarting, if you like, of Royal Arch rituals. So they're not ideal. I'm well aware that there are some lodges that are saying we will not work a first degree while the current restrictions are in place, and that's a matter for them entirely. Fine. And I've told my lodges here, they will have my support if they decide to go ahead and try to work the rituals, and they will have my support if they decide not to. Quite a few lodges, and I would suggest this might be a good idea. Quite a few lodges are saying, well, we're not sure about these changes, particularly to the first degree ceremony. So at our first meeting, we're going to try them. We're going to do an enactment.
Yeah.
And we're going to try it out and see if we can make it, the undoubtedly, impactful and, beautiful and impressive ceremony it is.
Yeah.
So time will tell. I'm guessing that, there will not be many initiations done over the next few months.
I think it's a really good way of doing it, actually, because so much you hear about masonry is there's a lot of people that are opposed to change and unwilling to try new things. But half the time, I think if you are capable enough and are if you can follow the ritual as much as you're going to do in your lodge, it's a great way of saying, oh, actually, that does work. It is slightly different, but if that's what we can only do for 6 to 8 months, maybe longer, then I think we're going to have to start doing it. So it's a good way of doing it. So I shall share that idea, especially with our lodge, and it's not like a hell of a lot has changed, and there's less to do in a sense. So it's easier for everyone to do it at home.
Yeah,
before we meet.
I have lodges here that are saying, yeah, we want to get on with it. We want to, we've got a long waiting list, and we want to get people in.
Yeah.
And people, prospective candidates understand that it's that we're having to compromise. And I'm saying to all of them, try it out, and try it out as I think I said at our last meeting, try it out with the lights turned off. Or dim the lights quite substantially so that it's dark and the candidate is semi hoodwinked as well.
Yeah.
Because at least that will provide more of a picture of people traversing from darkness to light.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
We do it in the 3rd degree, don't we? So why not try it in the 1st degree?
Amazing, fantastic. Thank you, Gareth.
Thank you. Our next one is from Andrew Gray of the Conley Club, and his question asks, how do you see the NYMC conferences developing? And is the current model of the annual conference working well? Or might there be a better alternatives that we could consider?
Well, I'm in favour of trying, lots of different things. The model, one could argue, is getting a bit samey. So we've had the same model now for 4 or 5 years, with plenary sessions and breakout sessions, and then then going back to tables feeding back and the like. Maybe it would be good to do something a bit different. And I think we should all be open to new ideas. And it's a great shame, isn't it, that the Hertfordshire meeting couldn't go ahead. Well, now, this week, actually, isn't it? But I would encourage anybody who's running a conference to just think outside the box, try some different things. Let's try and do something a bit different.
Yeah.
I do like the way in which we have our meetings and then perhaps have a large meeting in the evening. In a sense, of course, the value from these meetings, these conferences. I spent a lifetime going to conferences in my working career, and as always, the value is in the margins of the formal sessions. Normally, it's in the margins where you chat to people over a beer or a coffee, and just talk to them about how they do it in their province and how you do it in your province, and how things differ.
Yeah.
However it's done in the future, I think it will be valuable, but I would be very much in favour of just trying new things if people can come up with new ideas.
And I guess I think that's the point of new and young Mason clubs and light blue clubs and white table clubs and whatever name you want to give them, is adaptation and evolution, and kind of still carrying the whole traditional aspect and helping and supporting and assisting the provinces that their respective provinces. But I think that is one of the torches that we do carry, is that sense of evolution. And I think I completely agree with you, Gareth, in terms of thinking outside the box, thinking maybe of events, of ideas, of our options. It's always a good idea, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Leicestershire did it a little bit differently, didn't they? They and of course they have a fantastic facility that they could use to show people and to demonstrate, the most wonderful Masonic meeting rooms and museum of artifacts and the like. That was really
Beautiful,
interesting. So it's a challenge. I think it's a challenge for every host to try and up their game. I think I said last time that when asked which was the best one that I've been to, I said, well, they've got better every year.
Yeah.
And long may that continue. But I think to continue that, then some changes will have to be made. They'll have to think of new ways of doing things to keep people's interest. Because
you can't have things going stale.
There's no point in going back every year and talking about the same issues.
Yeah.
Because therein lies stasis, really.
Yeah. Thank you.
And just to show that you know, that there's a lot of value in the festive board, and you know, and you said about going to conferences, and the margin is in, you know, the conversation you have with the guy next to you that you wouldn't be able to have during the conference, but you can share your thoughts and ideas in the bar afterwards. I think maybe do you think a lot of the reluctance to go back is because we haven't got that social aspect? You know, you go in, you do your ceremony, and you go home, and there's a lot of that social interaction, and that interaction which is helpful, and a lot of people rely on within Masonry, just to share ideas. And
undoubtedly, you know, there will be a lot. I mean, particularly those that are you know, whose main interest, I suppose, in Freemasonry is the social side of things. Then, you know, the very thought of turning up with your plastic bag, going into the temple, putting your regalia on, with just a handful of people, doing the ceremony, taking your regalia off, and then walking out the door and going home, you know, would be anathema, really. I mean, they simply wouldn't feel that there was any point in going to a meeting. And I understand that, and I do think that you know, the lack of a festive board is a serious problem for us. Maybe an even bigger problem than the ceremonial restrictions that are being placed upon us.
Yeah, I think, yeah, we're all very much looking forward to get back to it, ceremonies and festive board, and also we'll stay tuned. But Gareth, once again, thank you so much for joining us once again for our Young and New Mason Interclub Social. It's been great to have you twice now, just to show how popular you are, and thank you for the questions that we didn't get quite around to asking you last time. So Right Worshipful Brother Gareth Jones, thank you so much. We'll hope to see you again in the future. Thank you to Matty once again, and thank you very much for tuning in. You'll get this video on YouTube and Facebook, but if you're watching it, you've already probably discovered that anyway. So we'll see you next Sunday, where we introduce our next guest speaker and 2 guest clubs. Gareth, thank you very much.
Cheers all.
Thanks very much. Bye.